Hey guys, it's Bear. Welcome
And
back to
Blackie.
the channel. And this is, of
Blackie.
course, Blackie. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute. It's been a long spring. He and I both have been going, you know what all he's been doing. He's been in the road teaching all over this side of the Mississippi River. And mine's just life. But anyway, thank you for your patience, for my viewers and for his viewers. Thank you for your patience. You've been busy.
I've been busy. I started the second week of March, and I just now, in the last week of May, broke to clear water again, where I'm not got something next week, got to be getting ready for it next week. Next week, it's just been constantly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Mine, like I said, life. Raising 2 grandchildren and a 17-year-old is not easy, especially as a single parent. But we've got school behind us, all that's done. Life should be much better from here. Just an update here. I don't know for sure. As y'all know, I've been saying about come April I'm retiring. I'm holding to that date, but it may be sooner. I've just got a itchy little feeling that I may go ahead and pull the trigger sooner. I've got a meeting in Montgomery to discuss that next week. But anyway, in the meantime, your trip to Ohio was extended.
Yeah.
Long.
Usually I can leave my home and I can be in that part of Ohio in about 12 hours or so. And they've got Interstate 75 completely tore up in the state of Tennessee. I made it regular time, to right outside Chattanooga, and when I rolled into 24 to come in Chattanooga, it was bumper to bumper, and I thought, okay, we got a wreck up here or something, or some sort of road construction. No. You know, whoever owns the barrels in the state of Tennessee that you see on the interstate is a rich man or woman, because it was just mile after mile of, there's 5 lanes, we got it necked down to 1, there's nothing going on, but we got all these barrels. You know, and you'd go by and you wouldn't see any construction going on, but they'd have it cut down to 1 barrel. So it would be 5 lanes necking down to 1 lane, and then you go about 3 miles up and it necks back down, but this time it's on the other side, and it took me 5.5 hours to go across the state of Tennessee, which I normally cross in around 2 hours.
Yeah. If it takes you 2 hours to cross Tennessee north to south, you're really dragging.
Yeah. And so I was really worried I was going to overheat my vehicle, the transmission, because it was stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. And you never got up to enough road speed to really let the engine cool the transmission, because you know it pumps up there through the radiator. So it was always like 5 or 6 miles an hour maybe. I swear you could have walked it faster. It seemed like it. At one point there in Chattanooga, this guy about 8 cars back of me got out, walked about 10 cars ahead of me, bummed a cigarette from somebody that he knew up there, sat down on the wall and had time to completely smoke that cigarette before his car pulled up with his wife driving for him to get back in. That's how stretched out it was.
And that's how nutty this life can be.
Woo!
When he told me that story, I thought to myself, we got to put that in old Wayz.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's nothing old about it, okay? It's just a fun fact for the day.
Well, it is a way, because, you know, we are spoiled. We think about traveling in a matter of how many hours. Whereas our ancestors thought about traveling in how many days, weeks, months it took to get there.
As a matter of fact, we mentioned in a past old Wayz about how spoiled we really are.
Yeah.
Because we want it yesterday.
Yesterday. Got to have it yesterday. And
my daughter's a prime example of that. Hey, baby.
my great-grandfather took 2 days to go from Geneva to Troy.
Yeah.
Because he was using horses.
Right.
And he had a big old cargo wagon and 2 big draft horses. And he'd go make a circuit through all the farms, finding out what they needed, he'd go to Geneva to the feed store and the hardware stores and stuff and pick up what you needed, and then make a circuit back around delivering the thing and getting paid for it.
It was like a teamster.
He was like a teamster. He'd go in a circle, you know, but it took him 2 days to go from what we'll do now in 45 minutes on the car.
Yeah. Yeah, we are a society that hates, well, I mean, we want immediate gratification.
Yep.
Y'all know I've been a lot of talking about putting together a, what's called a Pathfinder kit. Maybe, no, it's not a Pathfinder kit. What do they call those things?
A bug out bag,
No,
suspense, prepper?
no, it's a, those kits they used to have in trucks and Jeeps where they put their tools in them.
Oh yeah. Oh God, wait a minute.
Yeah, I know.
You're pulling a blank on me too now. You know, like an engineer kit.
Yeah.
A recovery kit.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what they call them today, is recovery kits.
Yeah, well, I've already got a shovel. It's an old World War II era Jeep shovel, and it would fit nicely under the driver's door of the Jeep, under the driver's seat of the Jeep on the outside of the vehicle. You may have seen them on model Jeeps or in historical photographs. But I got a new toy from Kaufman's the other day, and it's not military per se, but pardon me, it is government surplus, so we're going to wink an eye and call it a part of the kit. But it's a forester's axe with this loop on the end of it, and it's just a standard axe. Like I said, Kaufman's has these for sale. What I wanted to show you is this. If you're trying to dig into difficult soil, or like we have the orange concrete around here,
Yeah, red clay.
you attach this. You just take this, you attach it right here, you put a cotter pin through that hole. I don't know if you can see the hole.
Yeah.
There's the hole. And it makes a pick. And you can dig into the orange concrete and begin to make you a hole if you need a hole, you know, for whatever reason. It's got another really cool attachment. It's this mattock head, and again, it fits right in there like that. Put your pin through the hole, and you've got a digging tool. You probably, just thinking outside the box, you could probably sharpen it so that it sits, or get a second one so that it sits kind of like that, and make an as to clean up a log. For, like, you know, if you wanted to build you a cabin in the woods, you might be able to finagle one so that it had a little bit more curve on it, modify it, and so that the cutting edge was reverse of this, which is an interesting idea. I may have to make a trip back down there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, once you get multiples of it, you just get a welding shop, machine shop to turn into whatever attachment you want. They made a fire rake too, which is a broad blade with broad teeth. It's not like a rake, it's got cutouts. And that was for like a fire rake. So you could rake dirt, coal, cinders, whatever, and snow. You know, that was the one way to dig into hard packed snow. But those engineer tools like that, for us, in our application down here, it's where you get in the back on one of them roads and you get bogged down. We don't mean stuck.
No, we mean planted.
Planted, you know, where you have to take hunks of wood about this wide and actually tie it to the tire so that when the tire rotates, it will pick itself up and hop backwards a little bit. That's one of the reasons we used to have rims on our vehicles that had holes in it where you could pass ropes or a piece of chain through. It wasn't snow chain.
Oh, I've seen, like, with our tractor, I have seen my uncle that I used to work with here down here, and I've had to do it a time or two myself. You hook up a chain around the drive tire. You hook it into that hole, and it will pull you about 3 feet forward. And you reposition, and it'll pull you about 3 feet forward. And you can hopscotch your way out of a pretty bad situation.
We had a 2x4 cut into lengths. It was oak 2x4.
Right.
It'd come off of an oak pallet. And we took a bit and brace and made holes in it where 3/8 inch length chain would go in it. And we would put that on a tire so it would just come through in the tire and hook with quick link. And that way you only had one piece about that broad on it, so you got a 2x4 on it, so the tire would go to spin and it'd dig in, and that would shove the car forward just about 6 inches, or backwards, whichever way we was trying to go. And so you put one on each tire and it'd 6 inches, 6 inches, 6 inches, until you walked up on solid dirt again, and then you had to get out and get it out. Oh, it was a muddy mess, but you know.
But it worked.
Oh God! I mean, I can remember just stepping off into Pea River fully clothed because I was so covered in mud. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
Just splash in and sit there and trying to wash the mud off of you, you know, because you were already sopping wet and muddy. It didn't matter anymore.
Didn't matter a bit.
And that's really them old seat covers we had in the day back then. You'd always put vinyl or something underneath it, and then you'd put that. I used to think of it like a Western or something. Remember them woven pattern seat covers on it? Because those were cheap, and if you got them so muddy you couldn't stand them anymore, you'd take them off and hose them off till they wore
A
out.
lot of times those were saddle blankets.
Saddle blanket type, yeah. That's why I was trying to remember saddle blanket.
Yeah.
You know, because we just get so muddy trying to get in back in them places.
And you know, when you got it under a horse's saddle, there is not a more humid, hot, wet, sticky environment than the back of a horse in the summertime.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just not.
It's that white foamy sweat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I pulled the saddle off of a working horse, and I pulled the saddle off, and the blanket didn't come with it. And you go get up there, and it was like skinning, trying to pull it because of the suction. There was so much sweat and everything. Stink. Oh my God! And then you gotta get that curry comb and spread it out. If you don't, it's gonna blister him.
And then the horse just kind of just.
Oh,
he'll do this
oh
number,
yeah. He goes from
and you can see the muscles in his back twitching where he's loosening up.
Yeah.
It's really fun to watch.
He goes from being a horse to a dog, and it's like, oh yeah, ooh, look, a little more. Where are you going? A little more here.
A little more to the left.
Look, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember the official name of the horse was Luther, but we called him Lucifer because he was a pain in the butt, and nobody would ride him but me. But hot, sweaty days working down there in North Florida, running the lines, riding line, and fixing fences, riding fences, putting new staples in, stuff like that. It's 110 degrees in the heat, and he's almost black. And my scrawny little butt up on top of that McClellan saddle. And then we'd get, you know, I'd leave about 7 in the morning, and I'd get back about 5. That's how big that ranch was, to ride all them fences and make sure that something hadn't busted a fence or pushed through, or because they had a lot of cattle and had a lot of horses. And I carried a sandwich with me to eat, stopped somewhere in a shady place by a creek. Lucifer was smarter than me. I come down there, and God, it was hot. It was early August, and the little old creek down there. I went to stop to get off of him. He didn't take stop. He just walked on in the creek. So I was sitting on his back in the creek because it was chest high on him in the creek. Yeah. And I swear that horse went,
I'll bet he did.
I went,
I'll bet he did.
You know you're right. You ain't scared to get in here, and it's a sandy bottom. So we came in and sat down and let him cool off, and I cooled off. One of the things where you're soaking wet, an hour later your top's all dry from the sun. You're still soaking wet on the bottom, but you're dry in the sun.
And you got a happy horse.
And the horse is cooled off. That's much better too.
He's much more agreeable to do things that he may not want to do otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like he was saying, you know, when our grandparents were coming up. My granddaddy didn't buy his first car till he was 24 years old, and that was in 1925. And he had to go from here to Troy to pick it up, and that's a 28-mile trip any way you slice it, which is about a day and a half.
Yeah, when you're either walking or you got to ride a horse. And people walked a lot of places. We don't think about that today, but you know, it was only after World War I that trucks became available to the common people.
Yeah.
And it was war surplus. And definitely World War II, when you saw a lot of trucks and Jeeps and other vehicles become available where the average person could afford something because it was cheap. In fact, I remember reading a thing where Chevy and Ford were complaining about 1946. They were afraid the Army was going to dump all these cars and trucks on the surplus market at next to nothing, and that was going to hurt them because they were wanting to sell new vehicles. And well, I want to buy a new vehicle for $500 when for $50 I can get a 1939 Chevy car that's just painted green with a star on the side.
Yeah.
You know.
That would have been about the time that, did Truman federalize those plants? I know the unions were threatening to strike at that time, and I don't remember if Truman actually had to come in and federalize that, or if he just threatened real hard and they capitulated, they gave in.
I seem to remember something along that line, that he was, that it was causing that kind of back and forth and stuff. So, I mean, everybody, you know, it was a different time and a different way, and we were coming up just not that many years after the war, really. I mean, I was 20 years or less after the war.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we were both born about 20 years after World War II was over.
Yeah, and there was still so much World War II gear everywhere. I remember my grandmother having big old serving spoons that had U.S. stamped in them.
Yeah.
And my uncle had big old kettles that had USN on them. That, you know, big old aluminum kettles that were cook pots that we used for fish fryers and stuff. And if you were poor, you had surplus. That's all there was to it.
Yeah, Daddy had a bunch of stuff marked U.S. that he had bought, and he was a school principal, and most of the equipment in his school, in the kitchen, was marked either U.S. or USN or something, from the big serving spoons to the the smallest of pans. I mean, it was a quick, easy, inexpensive way to get what you needed, which is still a good, quick, easy, inexpensive way to get what you need for your camping.
I can remember every first aid kit I ever saw, up until probably high school, was a U.S. Army first aid kit. Either one from World War II that was a metal can you opened up and had Band-Aids and smelling salts and everything else in it. And I don't know why, I remember I got hit in the nose real bad, and they were wondering if my nose was broke. And my Uncle Luther had smelling salts in the med kit, and he popped and said, "Here, smell this." And of course, that just made it 10 times worse. He said, "No, it's not bad, it still works."
Ammonia is not your friend.
No, ammonia is not your friend. You know, but he didn't know, but he figured, well, there's something about noses, so we'll use that. He had things since the 50s and didn't know what they were used for, so we didn't have many people passing out around there.
Do you remember the little medical kits that you see in the World War II photos that fit on the web belt?
Yeah.
The little square ones?
Yes.
I've got one.
Yeah.
And it's never been opened. Sometimes I'm tempted to go and open it, and sometimes I don't want to.
You can go online and see every bit of it.
Yeah.
So you ain't got to open it up to see it. If you go online, it'll show you everything that's in that can.
Yeah.
And that's one of the advantages. We didn't know what was in that stuff, but now you can go online, there'll be some collector show you verbatim.
Yeah, now this one is painted OD green, but some of the paint is flaked off and it has a red undercoat. I don't know if that is just lead base, like they used to do ships, or like they do ships, or if it's because a red medical kit and a green medical kit had different meanings.
Mm-hmm.
The green medical kit was just a pressure bandage, was a sulfa pack. The red one was a pressure bandage with a sulfa packet and an ampule of morphine.
Yep.
And I've often wondered what was in that can, but you know, it's lasted this long unopened. I figure, what the heck, why open it now?
Yeah. Well, there was a guy years ago I remember reading about that he had got an estate up here near Anniston that had been his great-grandfather's place. And his great-grandfather had been a doc in the Indian Wars for the 1870s.
Really?
1890s. And there was a chest in there. And he opened it up, and it had the uniform, and it had all kinds of stuff in it, and he was looking at the thing, and he didn't understand what he was reading, and he had these glass bottles about that big that was sitting in there, 4 of them, and they were heavily padded with cotton. And so he took pictures of them, trying to find out, was this something medical or whatever, and it turned out to be nitroglycerin.
That was my guess. That was my first guess.
It was nitroglycerin for blasting that he had in the middle of that chest. Well,
Yeah.
you know, so they called an EOD and had him come in and get the nitro from him. But it obviously somewhere in there he had got around mining people and picked it up and he put it in his medical kit. But it was all kinds of tools, scalpels, bone saw, all of that. Where he'd been a doctor back there in the Army, which we call a medic, but they call doc. So.
Yeah, I knew a fellow over in Eufaula who used to tear down houses.
Mm-hmm.
And he was tearing down a house one time, years and years ago, probably in the early 80s, late 70s. He was tearing down a house over in the edge of Georgia, and he pulled back a floorboard, and there was a Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
And he pulled back another floorboard, and there was another Thompson. And he kept pulling back floorboards until he had 5 or 6
Mm-hmm.
1927 A1s in his possession.
I know that they tore down a smokehouse in my family up near New Brockton. There was a grease gun in it,
Really?
M3 grease gun. But obviously it'd come home in a duffel bag.
Yeah.
But it was in the walls of the smokehouse, and they were tearing it down.
See, I never find interesting things like that.
They took the tractor and threw a chain around it, just gonna collapse it, right? And when it went to collapsing and busting, the outer board bust out, and he thought it was a grease gun, literally an industrial grease gun. So he hollered, "Stop!" His son was running the tractor, and they got up there and pried it apart. No, it was a grease gun. It was wrapped up in a vinyl bag, and there was probably a full can of lithium grease smeared all over the whole thing. You know, there was no way it was ever going to rust. The barrel was solid full of grease. Whoever was it put it up for serious, which, you know, before 1968, after 68, they said, okay, if you got one of these guns from the war, come on out, admit it, you know, and you could sign off on it or whatever. Grandfather it in, but after 68 you couldn't. So obviously somebody had got it around 68 or whatever and didn't want to grandfather it in, so they plugged it up. So it ended up going to a local law enforcement so that he could claim it and get it, where they'd get away with it. But, you know.
Yeah, I wish I could find something cool like that.
We had stuff in them days, and it lasted. That thing is durable. Most of the stuff today, if you put it up in a barn or something, it ain't gonna last anyway. So
yeah, that's true.
You
of course, we wouldn't pack it with cosmoline either.
No.
I realized something. Speaking of what, I do have a neat story to recount. When I was a kid, recently I've been watching I've been watching the HBO miniseries The Pacific, and one of the main characters, two of the main characters are from Mobile, and I didn't realize until fairly recently that one of the main characters was a very good friend of my uncle and my aunt. Sidney Phillips was his name. He served in I believe it was the 1st Marines during World War II, and he's a major character in this miniseries. And I actually met Dr. Phillips several times, 4, 5, 6 times, when we would go down and visit with my aunt and uncle. And it was really cool to realize that. That's my claim to fame. I didn't get a grease gun or Thompson, but I did get to meet Sid Phillips.
I got lucky and got to meet a few, but the one that, like you said, I didn't realize who I was meeting.
Yeah.
Grouch introduced me to a guy, and when you look at one of the old black and white movies about World War II, it was a real life thing where the way they would tell them to drop their bomb load is they would drop flares down a tube instead of getting on the radio.
Yeah.
And so it was a magnesium flare, and it's going to burn at 3,000 degrees. And it's just an air tube. And so the guy would put it up there and he'd pull the pin, he'd let it go, and it'd gone down, and a flap went poof, and it blew it back up the tube into the plane. Well, that can burn a hole right through the side of the plane. And this guy grabbed it with his hands. It's 3,000 degrees. And had to walk like the third of the distance of that plane to throw it out the pilot's window. And
I remember that story.
And he was burned so bad, the plane diverted out, came back. When the word got, because he was one of the forward air bases late in the war, when the word got back of what he had done and everything, the vice president, or it might have been the president, called the commander of the Marines at Herbert Field in Hawaii, and they have the big display of all the decorations. And he told him, we're giving him the Medal of Honor, go ahead and get the damn thing out of the case and give it to him. So he busted the case and took it and flew to the forward base where they got him in the hospital, he was just horribly burned, and pinned it to his pillow. He survived, and he lived over here at Greenville, Alabama. And Grouch,
He did, didn't he?
Grouch knew him, and he said, come on, I'm going to go visit one of my people. He worked with the VA.
Sure.
And he said, I want to visit one of my people, I want to introduce you. So we drove over, and he introduced me. He said he got me, you could tell he was scarred up, but
Sure.
he could use his hands a little bit.
Yeah. It's interesting. I wish I could remember the gentleman's name, but I remember the story that you're telling. And we went to school with Mike Novoseli's son.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Novosel was a Medal of Honor winner.
In Vietnam, he was a helicopter pilot.
Yeah. And Desmond Doss lived up at Anniston for the last 2/3 of his life. So that's very impressive, very close.
There's a lot of famous people in history that ended up in Alabama.
Or were from Alabama.
Yeah. I mean, you start digging and you find out they were from such and such Alabama, whatever. More so than you would think. I mean, a lot of naval people. You wouldn't think that Alabama's a big naval town or something, but there was a lot of them ended up in it. And of course, I had family members from that day that I look back now I didn't understand.
Right.
But
Same here.
I had a family member that he was a ball turret gunner. And we had one family member that was stone cold colorblind. He saw everything in black and white. Him and his brother had tried to go in at the same time. His brother was all on fire and wanted to go in, but they'd been drafted. And this particular family member wasn't gung-ho to go. I mean, he was not a real big studly guy, but his brother was. His brother wanted to go, let's go. He got in there and the brother did the physical, and they looked at his feet and said flat feet, and he couldn't get in. And they grabbed Arthur, whether he wanted to go or not, because they found out he was colorblind. Tag you're it, because that was the big secret, is all of the flight wings of the 8th Air Force, every one of the groups, whatever the lead plane was going to be, had to have a stone cold colorblind guy, because the way they camouflage the airfields, a colorblind person could see the airfield and not see the actual face. And so each one of the flights had to have it. So they made him a gunner. A side gunner. He threw up the whole time. He said, I never stopped being airsick in that thing. He flew like 22 missions before the war ended. But it's like, he was scared to death every time he went up there. He said 2 people had grabbed him, they towed him to the plane. He said, I would get in it. I'd go. I was so scared, my legs would be just shaking like crazy. and they rigged him up where he could clip into the wall. He'd be standing there and said, why am I up here?
Yeah.
You know, but he went and he shot, he did his duty, but why am I here? And it was only later that they figured out the big secret was because you're colorblind. You know.
Different time, different age.
Yeah. How many great and famous people. Let me give a shout out to another channel. The Fat Electrician. If
Yes.
you like history, go look
Yes.
at the Fat Electrician. If you're easily offended, don't go look. But he brings up some of the most badass people in history, and I love when he points out, once again, they lied on the exam because they couldn't see well enough, and yet became a pilot or became a captain or an admiral or whatever, and they really couldn't pass the physical or whatever. So
Yeah,
go look 'em up.
he has some wonderful stories. Now, it's not PG.
No, it ain't PG.
Okay. It is not for the young and the faint of heart, but he is so much fun.
He is very entertaining. Well, brother, anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think we've about covered all the bases for today. We got you home
Yep.
and on R&R for a while, so
We'll
These
be able to do more of the old ways now that I'm free.
yeah, and I've got a few videos that I'm real anxious to do, but that'll be next week before we can get to them.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you for tuning in and watching. We hope you've enjoyed it, and don't forget to give us a like and share and subscribe. Tell your friends about Bear's Old Ways and anything else.
That's it, brother.
Well, guys, y'all have a good afternoon, a good week, and have a pleasant Memorial Day weekend. And don't forget the folks that went and gave their all so that you and I could sit here and talk. All right? We'll see you down the road.